Hello and welcome to the study materials for the Serve Safe Food Manager program. Hope you all find this helpful in preparing for your class, and it will hopefully give you an edge when you get ready to go into your exam. All right, so let's get started. So let's talk about some challenges to food safety before we actually begin to learn about it. Foodborne illness is a disease that's transmitted to people through food. An illness is considered an outbreak whenever it meets all three criteria. It has two or more people have the same symptoms after eating the same food, it's been investigated, and confirmed by laboratory analysis. Now, when we are planning and building a restaurant, it's hard not to stop and think about how do our day-to-day tasks get in the way of food safety. The pressure to work quickly can make it hard to take time to follow food safety practices. Your staff may speak a different language than you do, which can make it difficult to communicate. Cultural differences can also influence how food handlers view food safety. Staff often have different levels of education, making it more challenging to teach them. Illness-causing microorganisms are more frequently found on food that was once considered safe, and food that is received from a supplier that's not practicing food safety guidelines can also cause a foodborne illness outbreak. Not to mention, the number of customers at higher risk for getting a foodborne illness is increasing. An example of this is the growing elderly population. Training new staff leaves less time for food safety training. The ServeSafe program will provide the tools needed to overcome the challenges in managing a food safety program. So the National Restaurant Association figures show that one foodborne illness outbreak can cost an operation thousands of dollars and even result in closure. Imagine loss of customers and sales, loss of reputation, negative media exposure, lower staff morale. Most important, victims of foodborne illness may experience loss of work, medical costs, long-term disability, or even death. Pathogens are the greatest threat to food safety. They include certain viruses, parasites, fungi, and bacteria. Some plants and mushrooms and seafood that carry harmful toxins or poisons are also included in this group. Food service chemicals can contaminate food if they're not used correctly. This includes things like cleaners, sanitizers, polishers, machine lubricants, pesticides, hand lotions, hairsprays, and more. And then we have physical hazards, or physical contaminants, metal shavings from cans, staples, bandages, glass, dirt, naturally occurring objects such as fish bones and fillet, lemon seeds, or avocado pits. If food is not handled correctly, it can become unsafe. These are the 5 most common risk factors when dealing with or trying to prevent a foodborne illness. Purchasing food from unsafe sources can be a big problem, so purchase food from an approved and reputable supplier. Keep in mind that food prepared in a private home is also considered to be from an unsafe source and must be avoided at all costs. Food can also become unsafe when it is time and temperature abused. This means that the food has stayed at temperatures that are good for pathogen growth for too long. Food has been time and temperature abused when it is not held or stored correctly, if it's not cooked or reheated enough to kill pathogens, or if it's not being cooled correctly. Cross-contamination is when pathogens are transferred from one surface or food to another. I hope you have a pen and pencil because it would be a great time to write down a word. Cross-contamination. When pathogens are transferred from one surface or food to another. Cross-contamination can cause a foodborne illness when contaminated ingredients are added to food that receives no further preparation, washing, or cooking. A food handler touches contaminated food and then touches ready-to-eat food. Contaminated wiping cloths touch food contact surfaces. Or when you don't have enough utensils for all the food you're serving. Just some examples. Poor personal hygiene can cause foodborne illness when food handlers fail to wash their hands, cough or sneeze around food, touch or scratch wounds, then touch food, or work while they're sick. Pathogens can also spread to food if equipment has not been cleaned and sanitized correctly between uses. This can happen in the ways indicated here on the slide. So, there are two types of food that are more likely to become unsafe than other foods: TCS foods and ready-to-eat foods. TCS stands for food that requires time and temperature control for safety. I know, there's two T's. We're going to let them have it though. TCS, time and temperature control for safety. These foods fall into 12 categories. They include milk and dairy products, shell eggs, except those that are treated to eliminate non-typhoidal salmonella. So you can put shell eggs, except treated to eliminate non-typhi salmonella for short. Meat, including beef, pork, and lamb, poultry, fish, and shellfish and crustaceans. This also includes baked potatoes, heat-treated plant foods such as cooked rice, beans, and vegetables, tofu or other soy proteins, synthetic ingredients such as textured soy proteins and meat alternatives, sprouts and sprout seeds, sliced melons, cut tomatoes, cut leafy greens, and untreated garlic oil mixtures. Like TCS food, ready-to-eat food also needs careful handling to prevent contamination. So, ready-to-eat foods are foods that can be eaten without any further preparation, washing, or cooking. Ready-to-eat food includes cooked food, washed fruits and vegetables, deli meats, bakery items, sugar, spices, and seasonings. Elderly people are at higher risk because their immune systems weaken with age. The immune system is the body's defense against illness. Very young children are at high risk because they have not built up an adequate immune system either. People with compromised immune systems include those with certain medical conditions or on certain medications, people with cancer or on chemotherapy, people with HIV/AIDS, or transplant recipients may also be in the high risk category. Whenever you're working with high risk as your primary population, you want to abide by a certain set of rules. For example, if you work at a nursing home, a daycare, or a hospital. So set up standard operating procedures that focus on these areas. The ServSafe program will show you exactly how to do this. So the 5 areas are purchasing from an approved reputable supplier, controlling time and temperature, preventing cross-contamination, practicing good personal hygiene, and cleaning and sanitizing. Managers must set up standard operating procedures that focus on these measures. They must train their staff on these procedures. You will train staff to be able to assist you in implementing good food safety practices. Staff aren't the only ones who need training to keep food safe. The FDA Food Code requires the person in charge of food service operation to become a certified food protection manager, and they must be on site at all times during operating hours. So it's not enough that they're just on payroll, they must also be available in the building at all times. So there is one exception to this. The person in charge must also be able to show that they have required knowledge to become a certified food protection manager. You must pass a test from an accredited program. The program must be accredited by an agency approved by the Conference of Food Protection. Completing the ServSafe Manager course and passing the ServSafe Food Protection Manager Certification examination meets this requirement. So, why is this so important to become certified? The Center for Disease Control, or CDC, study suggests that the presence of certified food protection manager reduces the risk of a foodborne illness outbreak for an establishment. The study also suggests that it is a distinguishing factor between restaurants that experienced a foodborne illness outbreak and those that had not. Also, the FDA's Retail Food Risk Factor study suggests that the presence of a food protection manager has a positive correlation with effective risk factors such as poor personal hygiene. So, simply put, the CDC is able to demonstrate via mountain of studies that having a certified food protection manager on site greatly increases your chance of success as a restaurant. The FDA, our Food and Drug Administration, inspects all food except for meat, poultry, and eggs, and regulates any food that's transported across state lines. It also issues a food code. This science-based code provides recommendations for food safety regulations. The USDA regulates and inspects meat, poultry, and eggs, regulates food across the state boundaries, and involves more than one state. The agencies such as the CDC, or Center for Disease Control and Prevention, and the U.S. Public Health Services, PHS, conduct research into the causes of foodborne illness outbreaks and assist in investigating outbreaks. State and local regulatory authorities write and adopt codes that regulate retail and food service operations. Regulatory authorities have many responsibilities that are listed here. Some of their responsibilities are related to food safety. So when they say local regulatory authority, what they're referring to for us in Georgia is the county. For other places like Texas, they're referring to the city. So think about whoever regulates the laws in your area. Chapter 2, Forms of Contamination. How contaminations happen. One of the food service manager's most important role is to prevent any type of contamination of food from occurring. Contamination is the presence of harmful substance in food. Those substances can be biological, chemical, or physical. Most contaminants cause foodborne illness. Others result in a physical injury. Contaminants are found in animals we use for food, the air, water, and dirt, and chemicals used in operation. Contaminants occur naturally in foods such as bones and fish. Food can be contaminated on purpose even. Most food is contaminated accidentally though. Food handlers who don't wash their hands after using the restroom may contaminate food and surfaces with feces from their fingers. Once the food that the food handler touched is eaten, a foodborne illness may result. This is called the fecal oil route of contamination. Failure to spot signs of pests in the operation can cause contamination because pests are a major source of disease. Biological contaminants occur when harmful microorganisms, referred to as pathogens in the serve-safe class, contaminate food. So microorganisms are small living organisms that can only be seen with a microscope, and pathogens is a type of harmful microorganism that can make someone sick when eaten or produce a toxin that causes an illness. Toxin is just another word for poison. Each type of pathogen will be discussed in more detail throughout this presentation. According to the Food and Drug Administration, or the FDA, there are over 40 kinds of bacteria, viruses, parasites, and molds that can occur in food and cause a foodborne illness. 6 of these have been singled out by the FDA because they are highly contagious and can cause severe illness. These have been dubbed the Big Six. The symptoms of a foodborne illness vary depending on which illness a person has, but most victims of foodborne illness share common symptoms. Now, every person who is sick from a foodborne illness will have all of these symptoms, nor are the symptoms of foodborne illness limited to this list. How quickly foodborne illness symptoms appear in a person is known as the onset time of illness. The onset time depends on the type of foodborne illness a person has. They can range from 30 minutes to as long as 6 weeks. How severe the illness is can vary as well, from mild diarrhea to death. Bacteria live in our bodies. Some types of bacteria keep us healthy, while others cause illness. The most important way to prevent a bacteria from causing a foodborne illness is to control the time and temperature. Bacteria need 6 conditions to grow. You can remember these conditions by thinking of the words fat Tom. So the F in fat Tom stands for food. Most bacteria need nutrients to survive, and TCS foods support the growth of bacteria better than other types of food. The pH scale is the measure of acidity. It ranges from 0 to 14. A value of 0 is highly acidic, while a value of 14 is highly alkaline. A pH of 7 is neutral. Bacteria grow best in food that is neutral to slightly acidic. Bacteria grow even more rapidly from 70 degrees to 125 degrees Fahrenheit, or 21 to 52 degrees Celsius. Don't worry, you don't have to remember both. You can remember whichever one is more natural for you, Fahrenheit or Celsius. The test will give you both options and it's multiple choice, so that makes it a little easier. Bacteria also needs time to grow. The more time bacteria spends in the temperature danger zone we just talked about, the greater the chance it will have to grow to unsafe levels. Oxygen. Some bacteria need oxygen to grow, while other bacteria can grow when oxygen isn't even there. The amount of moisture available in food is called water activity, or AW. The AW scale ranges from 0 to 1. The higher the value, the more available moisture in the food. Temperature and time are the two most important conditions for bacterial growth that can be controlled in the operation. Many times bacteria can cause a foodborne illness. The FDA has identified 4 particular that are highly contagious and cause a severe illness. These bacteria are included in the FDA's Big 6 pathogens. The food handlers with illness from these bacteria can never work in a food service operation while they're sick. Salmonella typhi lives only in humans. People with typhoid fever carry the bacteria in the bloodstream and intestinal tract. Eating only a small amount of this bacteria can make a person sick. The severity of the symptoms depends on the health of the person and the amount of bacteria eaten. The bacteria are often in a person's feces for weeks after symptoms have ended. Next, non-typhoidal salmonella. Many farm animals carry non-typhoidal salmonella naturally. Eating only a small amount of this bacteria can make a person sick. The severity of symptoms depends on the health of the person and the amount of bacteria eaten. The bacteria are often in a person's feces for weeks after symptoms have ended. Produce linked with salmonella includes tomatoes, peppers, and cantaloupes. Shigella spp is found in the feces of humans with illness. Most illnesses occur when people eat or drink contaminated food or water. Flies can also transfer the bacteria from feces to food. Eating only a small amount of these bacteria can make a person sick. High levels of bacteria are often in a person's feces for weeks after symptoms have ended. Sugar toxin producing E. coli can be found in the intestines of cattle. The bacteria can contaminate meat during slaughtering. It is also found in infected people. Eating only a small amount of bacteria can make a person sick. Once eaten, it produces toxins in the intestines, which cause illness. The bacteria are often in a person's feces for weeks after symptoms have subsided. Next, viruses. Viruses are the leading cause of foodborne illness. Norovirus is one of the leading causes of foodborne illness. It is often transmitted through airborne vomit particles. So some, such as hepatitis A, are not destroyed by normal cooking temperatures. Good personal hygiene must be practiced when handling food and food contact surfaces. Quick removal and cleanup of vomit is very important. These 2 viruses are included in the FDA's Big 6 pathogens. The FDA has identified 2 viruses that are highly contagious and can cause severe illness: hepatitis A and norovirus. Hepatitis A is mainly found in the feces of people infected with it. The viruses can contaminate water and many types of food. is commonly linked with ready-to-eat foods. However, it's been linked with shellfish from contaminated water as well. The virus is often transferred to food when infected food handlers touch food or equipment with fingers that have feces on them. Eating only a small amount of this virus can make a person really sick. An infected person may not show symptoms for weeks, but can be very infectious. Cooking does not destroy hepatitis A. And like hepatitis A, norovirus is commonly linked with ready-to-eat foods as well. It has been linked with contaminated water. Norovirus is often transferred to food when an infected food handler touch food or equipment with fingers that have feces on them. Eating only a small amount of norovirus can make a person sick. It's also very contagious. People become contagious within hours after eating it. The virus is often in the person's feces for days after symptoms have ended. Next, parasites. I know, we're halfway through. Don't worry. Parasites. They require hosts to live and reproduce, often found in seafood, wild game, and fruit presses with contaminated water, such as produce. How do I prevent parasites in my restaurant? Well, you want to make sure you're purchasing food from an approved and reputable supplier. Make sure you cook foods to required minimum internal temperatures. And any fish that you serve that will be raw or undercooked should be correctly frozen by the manufacturer. Fungi include yeast, molds, and mushrooms. Some molds and mushrooms produce toxins. You want to throw out any moldy food unless the mold is a natural part of the food, like in blue cheese or camembert. Some toxins are naturally associated with certain plants, mushrooms, and seafood. Toxins are a natural part of some fish. Other toxins, such as histamine, are made by pathogens on fish when it's time and temperature abused. This can occur in tuna, bonito, mackerel, and mahi-mahi. Some fish become contaminated when they eat smaller fish that eat a toxin. One of these toxins is the ciguatera toxin. Ciguatera toxin can be found in barracuda, snapper, grouper, and amberjack. Shellfish such as oysters can also be contaminated when they eat marine algae that have a toxin. Right. So, what about the illnesses with biological toxins? Well, the symptoms and onset times vary, but people typically experience illness within minutes. Some general symptoms associated with biological toxins include diarrhea and vomiting, neurological symptoms such as tingling and reversal of hot and cold sensations, flushing of the face, difficulty breathing, burning in the mouth, heart palpitations, or hives. Toxins cannot be destroyed by cooking or freezing. The most important way to prevent a foodborne illness is to purchase them from an approved and reputable supplier. This includes plants, mushrooms, and seafood. It's important to control time and temperature when handling raw fish especially. Chemicals contaminate food if they are used or stored wrong. Cleaners, sanitizers, polishes, machine lubricants, pesticides can be risky. Also include deodorizers, first aid products, health and beauty products such as hand lotions and hairsprays. Certain types of kitchenware and equipment can be risk for chemical contamination such as pewter, copper, or zinc. And some types of painted pottery. These materials are not always safe for food and can cause contamination. This is especially true when acidic food, such as tomato sauce, is held in them. The chemicals you use must be approved for use in food service operation. They must also be necessary for the maintenance of the facility. Make sure you use chemicals only for their intended purpose. Handling food and food equipment and utensils approved for food service use, and make sure the manufacturer's labels on the original chemical container are readable. Make sure you follow the directions and local regulatory requirements when throwing them out. Foods can become contaminated when objects get into it as well. It can also happen when natural objects are left in foods like bones in a fish fillet. Some symptoms include mild to fatal injuries, cuts, dental damage, choking, bleeding, and pain. Make sure you purchase your food from an approved and reputable supplier. Closely inspect the food when you receive it and take steps to prevent physical contamination throughout the flow of food. We'll talk more about that later. You must take steps to stop people who are trying to contaminate food. This may include the groups listed on the slide. These people may try to tamper with your food using biological, chemical, or physical contaminants. They may even use radioactive materials. Attacks may occur anywhere in the food supply chain, but they are usually focused on a specific food item, process, or business. The best way to protect food is to make it difficult as possible for someone to tamper with it. For this reason, a food defense program should deal with the points in your operation where food is at risk. The FDA has created a tool that can be used to develop a food defense program. It is based on the acronym ALERT. It can also be used to help you identify the points in your operation where food is at risk. Assure. Make sure the products you receive are from a safe source. Supervise product deliveries, use approved suppliers who practice food defense, and request that delivery vehicles are locked or sealed. Look. Monitor the security of the products in your facility. Limit access to the prep and storage areas. Locking storage areas is one way to do this. Create a system for handling damaged products. Store chemicals in a secure location. Train staff to spot food defense threats. And make sure you also train your employees well. Employees, know who is in your facility. Limit access to prep and storage areas. Identify visitors and verify their credentials. Conduct background checks on your staff. The R is for reports. Keep information related to food defense accessible. Receiving logs, office files, documents, staff files, random food defense, self-inspections, all of that information should be kept on file. Last one is threat. Identify what you will do and who you will contact if there is suspicious activity or threat to your operation. Hold any product you suspect to be contaminated. Contact your local regulatory authority immediately and maintain an emergency contact list. So here are some things you should consider when you're responding to an outbreak. These will be discussed in the next several slides. So ask the person making the complaint for general contact information to identify the food that was eaten. Also ask for a description of the symptoms and when the person first got sick. Contact the local regulatory authority if you suspect an outbreak. Set the suspected product aside if any remains. Include a label that says, do not use, do not discard, just like the one shown on the slide. Log information about the suspect food. This might include product description, production date, and lot number. The sell-by date and pack size should also be recorded if possible. Maintain a list of food handlers scheduled at the time of suspected contamination. These staff members may be subject to an interview or sampling by investigators. They should also be interviewed immediately by management about their health status. Cooperate with local regulatory authorities. Provide appropriate documentation. You may be asked to provide temperature logs, HACCP documents, or staff files. Review food handling procedures to identify if standards are not being met or procedures not working. So the next topic we're going to talk about is food allergens. An allergic reaction is when an immune system mistakenly considers the allergen to be harmful and attacks the food protein. Depending on the person, an allergic reaction can happen just after the food is eaten or several hours later. This reaction could include some or all of the symptoms identified on the slide. Initially, symptoms of an allergic reaction may be mild. They can become serious quickly. In severe cases, anaphylaxis, a severe allergic reaction that can lead to death, may result. While more than 160 food items can cause an allergic reaction, just 8 of them alone account for 90% of all reactions in the United States. These 8 foods are known as the Big 8. Food labels on the product that you purchase are an important tool to identify allergens in the operation. Federal law requires manufactured products containing one or more of the Big 8 allergens to clearly identify them on the ingredient label. Your staff should be able to tell customers about the menu items that contain a potential food allergen. At minimum, have one person available per shift to answer customer questions about the menu items. When customers say they have a food allergy, your staff should take it seriously. Tell customers how the item is prepared. Sauces, marinades, and garnishes often include allergens. For example, peanut butter is sometimes used as a thickener in sauces or marinades. This is an important detail for customers to know if they have a peanut allergy. Tell customers if the food that they're allergic to is in the menu item. Identify any secret ingredients. For example, your operation may have a house specialty that includes an allergen. Suggest menu items that don't contain the food that the customer is allergic to. Clearly mark or otherwise indicate the order for the guest with the identified food allergy. This is done to inform the kitchen staff of the guest's food allergy. Confirm the allergen special order with the kitchen staff when picking up the food. Make sure no garnishes or other items containing the allergen touch the plate. Hand deliver food to guests with allergies. Delivering food separately from the other food delivered to a table will help prevent contact with the food allergens. Staff must make sure the allergens are not transferred from food or food contact surfaces to another. This is called cross-contact. Cross-contact is the transfer of food allergens from one surface or food to another. For example, cooking different types of food in the same fryer, or letting food touch surfaces, equipment, or utensils that touch an allergen. Make sure you check recipes and ingredient labels to confirm the allergen is not present. Wash, rinse, and sanitize cookware, utensils, and equipment before prepping food, as shown in the photo on the slide. This includes food prep surfaces. Some operations use separate set of cooking utensils just for allergen special orders, also as shown on the slide. Make sure the allergen does not touch anything for the customer with food allergies. Include food, beverage utensils, equipment, and gloves. Wash your hands and change gloves before prepping food. Use separate fryers and cooking oils when frying food for customers with food allergies. Label food packaged on site for retail sale. Name all the food allergens on the label and follow any additional labeling requirements for your area. Chapter 3. The Safe Food Handler. With some illnesses, a person may infect others before showing any symptoms at all. For example, a person could spread hepatitis A for weeks before having any symptoms. With other illnesses, a person may infect others for days or even months after symptoms are gone. Norovirus can be spread for days after symptoms have ended. For some people carry pathogens and infect others without ever getting sick themselves. These people are known as carriers. People often do things that can spread pathogens without knowing it. To avoid causing a foodborne illness, food handlers must pay close attention to what they do with their hands and avoid the actions indicated on this slide. Don't underestimate your role in personal hygiene program. You have many responsibilities to make the program work. Some of these are highlighted here. Hand washing is the most important part of a good personal hygiene program. It may seem like an obvious thing to do. Even so, many food handlers do not wash their hands the correct way or as often as they should. You must train your food handlers to wash their hands, and then you must monitor them. Hands must be washed in a sink designated for hand washing. Monitor food handlers to make sure they do this. They should never wash their hands in sinks designated for food prep or dishwashing, or sinks used to discard wastewater. For serve safe, they typically refer to these sinks as service sinks. Service sinks are sinks used to discard of wastewater. To wash hands or prosthetic devices correctly, follow the steps on the slide. The whole process should take at least 20 seconds. Take note, scrubbing your hands and arms vigorously or lathering the soap should take at least 10 seconds. If you are not careful after washing your hands, you can contaminate them. Consider using a paper towel to turn off the faucet and to open the door when you're leaving the restroom. You want to wash your hands before touching any food or food contact surface, and wash your hands often. If you see food handlers who are not following proper hand washing procedures, correct the situation immediately. If they have touched food or food contact surfaces with unclean hands, take corrective actions. Hand antiseptic isn't just another way of saying hand sanitizer. It should be free of fragrances, exfoliants, or anything that could cause an allergic reaction. Long fingernails may be hard to keep clean, can rip gloves. They can also chip and become physical contaminants. Fingernails should be kept trimmed and filed. This will allow for nails to be cleaned easily. Ragged nails can be hard to keep clean. They may also hold pathogens and break off, becoming physical contaminants. Do not wear false fingernails. They can be hard to keep clean. False fingernails can also break off into food. However, false fingernails can be worn if the food handler agrees to wear single-use gloves. Do not wear nail polish. It also can disguise dirt under the fingernails and may flake off into food. However, nail polish can be worn if the food handler agrees to use single-use gloves. Infected wounds, cuts, and boils must be covered if they are open and draining to prevent pathogen from contaminating food and food contact surfaces. How an infected wound or boil is covered depends on where it's located. If the wound or boil is located on the hand, finger, or wrist, it should be covered with an impermeable cover like a finger cot or a bandage. The impermeable means that liquid from the wound cannot pass through the cover. Then places a single-use glove over the cover. A wound on the arm must be completely covered. As the name implies, single-use gloves are designed for one task, after which they must be discarded. Used properly, they can help keep food safe by creating a barrier between hand and food. However, single-use gloves should never be used in place of hand washing. Always wear single-use gloves when handling ready-to-eat food. The exceptions include when washing produce, when handling ready-to-eat ingredients for a dish that will be cooked to the correct internal temperature. Only gloves approved for food service should be purchased. Buy only single-use gloves for handling food. Never wash and reuse gloves. Make sure you also provide your staff with the correct sizes. Some food handlers and customers may be sensitive to latex. Consider providing gloves made from other materials. You want to change your gloves anytime they become ineffective or if you're changing tasks. Food can become contaminated when it has been handled with bare hands. This is especially true when hands have not been washed correctly or have infected cuts or wounds. For this reason, do not handle ready-to-eat food with bare hands. If you are primarily serving high-risk populations, never handle ready-to-eat food with bare hands. There may be exceptions. It may be acceptable to handle ready-to-eat food with bare hands in a situation shown on the slide. Some regulatory authorities allow bare hand contact with ready-to-eat food. If your jurisdiction allows this, you must have specific policies in place about staff health. You must also train your staff in hand washing and good personal hygiene practices. Wearing dirty clothes or neglecting to shower probably will not go over well with your guests, but there are real food safety concerns here too. Keeping food safe means paying attention to personal hygiene. The entire staff needs to know the basics. Pathogens can be found on the hair, skin. There's a greater risk of these pathogens being transferred to food and food equipment if the food handler doesn't follow good personal hygiene policies. Make sure food handlers shower or bathe before they come to work. Wear a clean hat or other hair restraint when in a food prep area. This can keep hair from falling into food or food contact surfaces. Do not wear hair accessories that could become physical contaminants. Hair accessories should be limited to items that keep hands out of hair and hair out of food. Do not wear false eyelashes. They can become physical contaminants as well. Food handlers with facial hair should also wear a beard net or beard restraint. Make sure you wear clean clothes daily. Change soiled uniforms, including aprons, as needed to prevent contamination. If possible, change into work clothes at work. Store street clothing and personal belongings in designated areas. This includes items such as backpacks, jackets, electronic devices, keys, and personal medication. Make sure these items are stored in a way that does not contaminate food or food contact surfaces. Keep dirty clothing that is stored in operation away from food and food prep areas. You can do this by placing dirty clothes in a non-absorbent container or washable laundry bag. This includes dirty aprons, chef coats, and other uniforms. Food handlers should always remove their apron before leaving the prep area. Remove jewelry from hands and arms before prepping food or when working around prep areas. Food handlers cannot wear any rings except for a plain wedding band, bracelets, including medical bracelets, or watches. Your company may also require you to remove other types of jewelry. This may include earrings, necklaces, or facial jewelry. These items can fall off and become a physical contaminant. Ornate jewelry can be difficult to clean and can hold pathogens. Servers may wear jewelry if allowed by company policy. Small droplets of saliva can contain thousands of pathogens. In the process of eating, drinking, smoking, or chewing gum or tobacco, saliva can be transferred to hands or directly to food being handled. That's why food handlers must not eat, drink, smoke, or chew gum or tobacco. Employees can drink from a covered container if they can handle the container carefully to prevent contamination of their hands, the container, and exposed food. A correctly covered container will include a lid with a straw or a sip lid top. You must tell your staff to let you know when they're sick. This includes newly hired staff who have not started working yet. Your regulatory authority may ask for proof that you've done this, which can be provided in a number of ways as shown on this slide. If a staff member or someone they live with is diagnosed with one of the big 6 diseases, they must inform the person in charge prior to coming to work. If they have any symptoms closely related to a foodborne illness, they should report it to management prior to coming to work. As a manager, you should watch out for food handlers for signs of illness, such as the symptoms shown on the slide. Sometimes people may work despite them being sick due to financial difficulty or other personal situation. This information on restricting or excluding staff from medical conditions is only a guide. Work with your local regulatory authority to determine the best course of action. So, if a food handler has an infected wound or boil that is not properly covered, you should restrict them from working with exposed food, utensils, and equipment. If they have a sore throat with a fever, they are restricted from food handling unless they work with high risk, then they would be excluded. The food handler who has a persistent sneezing, coughing, or running nose with discharges from the eyes, nose, or mouth should be restricted from working with food, utensils, or equipment. The food handler has at least one of the symptoms below should be excluded. And if someone has jaundice, they should also be reported to local regulatory authority before allowed to come to work. Some food handlers diagnosed with an illness may not experience symptoms, or the symptoms may have ended. Work with the medical practitioner and the local regulatory authority to determine whether the food handler must be excluded from the operation or restricted from working with exposed food, utensils, and equipment. The medical practitioner regulatory authority will also determine when an employee can safely return to the operation and carry out their regular food handling duties. All this information on restricting and excluding staff from medical conditions is only a guide. Work with your local regulatory authority to determine the best course of action for you. Chapter 4, the flow of food. So the flow of food is the path that food takes through operation, and your job is to keep it safe and prevent cross-contamination and time and temperature of use. For example, a frozen food might be safe when it leaves a processor plant. However, on the way to the supplier's warehouse, the food might thaw. Once in your operation, the food might not be stored correctly, or it might not even be cooked to the correct internal temperature. These mistakes can add to serious foodborne illness. Cross-contamination can happen at almost any point in the flow of food. When you know how and where it can happen, it's fairly easy to prevent. The most basic is to keep raw and ready-to-eat foods away from each other. Each type of food should have a separate equipment. For example, use only one set of cutting boards, utensils, and containers for raw poultry. Use another set for raw meat. Use a third set for produce. Colored cutting boards and utensils can help equipment stay separate. The color tells the food handlers which equipment to use for which food item. You might also use yellow for raw chicken, red for raw meat, and green for produce. Clean and sanitize all your work surfaces, equipment, and utensils after each task. When you cut up raw chicken, for example, you can get by with just rinsing the equipment. Pathogens such as non-typhoidal salmonella can contaminate the food through cross-contamination. To prevent this, you must wash, rinse, and sanitize the equipment. If you need to use the same table to prep different types of food, prep raw meat, fish, and poultry, and prep ready-to-eat foods at different times. You must clean and sanitize work surfaces and utensils between each type of food. Also, by prepping ready-to-eat food before raw food, you can reduce the chance of cross-contamination. Separate raw meat, poultry, and seafood from unwashed and ready-to-eat fruits and vegetables. Do this during storage, preparation, holding, and display to prevent cross-contamination. Buy food that does not require much prepping or handling. For example, you could buy pre-cooked chicken breast or chopped lettuce. Most foodborne illnesses happen when TCS foods have been time and temperature abused. Remember, TCS means it has been time and temperature abused. TCS means it's time and temperature controlled for safety. And it is time temperature abuse anytime it remains between 41 degrees Fahrenheit and 135 degrees Fahrenheit. This is called the temperature danger zone because pathogens grow quickly in this range. Learn which food item should be checked and how often, and by whom. Make sure food handlers understand what to do, how to do it, and why it's important. Give food handlers their own thermometer and have them use timers. Print simple forms for recording temperatures and when they are taken. Post the forms on clipboards outside the coolers, freezers, and near prep areas, next to cooking and holding equipment. Have procedures to limit the time TCS food spends in the temperature danger zone. This might include limiting the amount of time that food can be removed from a cooler when prepping food. Make sure the food handlers know what to do when the time and temperature standards are not met. For example, if you hold soup on a steam table and its temperature falls below 135, after 2 hours, you might reheat it to the correct temperature or throw it out. Biometallic stem thermometers can check temperatures from 0 to 220 degrees Fahrenheit. This thermometer measures temperature through a metal stem. When checking temperatures, insert the stem into the food to the dimple. You must do this because the sensing area for the thermometer goes from the tip of the stem to the dimple. This trait makes this thermometer useful for checking temperatures of large, thick food. It's usually not particularly good for thin food such as hamburger patties. The calibration nut is used to adjust the thermometer to the accurate temperature, correct temperature. The indicator head should have easy to read markings. Clear markings reduce the chance that someone will misread this thermometer. The thermometer must be scaled in at least 2-degree increments. The sensing area on thermocouples and thermomisters is on the tip of their probe. This means you don't have to insert them into the food as far as the bimetallic stem thermometer to get a correct reading. Thermocouples and thermomisters are good for checking temperatures of both thick and thin food. Thermocouples and thermomisters come in several styles and sizes. Many come with different types of probes. Immersion probes are used to check temperature of liquids such as soups, sauces, and frying oil, while surface probes are used to check the temperature of flat cooking equipment such as griddles. Penetration probes are used to check the internal temperature of food as well. And then we have the small diameter probes should be used to check the internal temperature of thin foods such as meat patties or fish fillet. Air probes are used to check the temperature of inside coolers and ovens. Infrared thermometers do not need to touch a surface to check its temperature. This means there's less chance of cross-contamination and damage to food. However, these thermometers cannot measure air temperature or internal food temperatures. Hold the thermometer as close as possible to the food package, or equipment without touching it. Do not take readings through glass or metal such as stainless steel or aluminum. Always follow the manufacturer's guidelines. This should give you the most accurate reading. Other tools are available as well to help you monitor temperature. A maximum registering thermometer is one type. This thermometer indicates the highest temperature reached during use and is used where temperature readings cannot be continuously observed. It works well for checking final rinse temperatures for dishwashing machines. Some devices monitor both time and temperature. The time and temperature indicators, or TTI, is an example. These tags are attached to packaging by the supplier. A color change appears in the window if the food has been time and temperature abused during the shipment or storage. This color change is not reversible, so you know the food has been abused. Some suppliers place temperature recording devices inside the delivery trucks. These devices constantly check and record temperatures. You can check the device during receiving to make sure food is at a safe temperature during shipment. Thermometers should be washed, rinsed, and sanitized and air dried before and after each use to prevent cross-contamination. Keep storage cases clean too. Be sure the sanitized solution you use for food contact surfaces is at the correct concentration levels. Glass thermometers, such as candy thermometers, can be a physical contaminant if they break. They can only be used when enclosed in a shatterproof casing. When checking the temperature of food, insert the probe into the thickest part of the food. The simplest is going to be the center. Also, take another reading in a different spot. The temperature may vary in different areas. Before recording the temperature, wait for the thermometer reading to steady. Wait at least 15 seconds after you insert the stem or probe into the food. There are two ways to calibrate thermometers. The boiling point method involves adjusting the thermometer to the temperature at which water boils, 212 degrees Fahrenheit or 100 degrees Celsius, depending on your elevation, of course. The ice point method involves adjusting the thermometer temperature at which water freezes, 32 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 degrees Celsius. Use crushed ice if you have it. Add tap water until the container is full. Stir the mixture well. Make sure the sensing area is submerged and do not let the stem or probe touch the container itself. Wait 30 seconds or until the indicator stops moving. To calibrate a bimetallic stem thermometer, adjust it by holding the calibration nut with the wrench or other tool. To calibrate a thermocouple or thermometer, follow the manufacturer's directions. Chapter 5: The Flow of Food, Purchasing, Receiving, and Storing. Food must be purchased from an approved, reputable supplier. These suppliers have been inspected and can show you an inspection report. They also meet all applicable local, state, and federal laws. This applies to all suppliers in supply chain. The operations chain can include growers, shippers, packers, manufacturers, distributors, trucking fleets and warehouses, and local markets. Develop a relationship with your suppliers and get to know their food safety practices. Consider reviewing their most recent inspection reports. These reports can be from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the USDA, the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, or a third-party inspector. They should be based on good manufacturing practices, GMP, or good agricultural practices, GAP. Make specific staff responsible for receiving. Provide the staff with the tools they need, including purchasing orders, thermometers, and scales. Then make sure enough trained staff are available to receive and inspect food items promptly. The process starts with the visual inspection of the delivery truck. Check it for signs of contamination. Inspect the overall condition of the vehicle. Look for signs of pests. If there are signs of problems, reject the delivery. Continue with the visual inspection of food items. Make sure they have been received at the correct temperature. Once inspected, food items must be stored as quickly as possible in the correct areas. This is especially true for refrigerated and frozen items. Some food service operations receive food after hours when they are closed for business. This is often referred to as a key drop delivery. The supplier is given a key or other access to the operation to make the delivery. The products are then placed in coolers, freezers, and dry storage areas. The delivery must be inspected once you arrive at the operation and meet the criteria identified on the slide. Occasionally, you may be able to recondition and use items that have been rejected. For example, a shipment of cans with contaminated surfaces may be cleaned and sanitized, allowing them to be used. However, the same cans may not be reconditioned if they are damaged. Food items you have received may sometimes be recalled by the manufacturer. This may happen when a food contamination is confirmed or suspected. It can also occur when items have been mislabeled or misbranded. Often food is recalled when food allergens have not been identified on the label. Most vendors will notify you of the recall. However, you should consider monitoring recall notifications made by the FDA and the USDA. Follow the guidelines in the slide when notified for a recall. Identify the recalled food items by matching information from the recall notice to the item. This may include manufacturer's IDs, the item that was manufactured, and the use by date. Remove the item from inventory, place it in a secure, appropriate location. They may be a cooler or dry storage area. Store the recalled item separately from food, utensils, and equipment, linens, and single-use items. Label the item in a way that will prevent it from being placed back into inventory. Some operations do this by including a do not use, do not discard label on recalled food items. Inform staff not to use the product. Refer to the vendor's notification or recall notice for what to do with the item. For example, you might be instructed to throw it out or return it to the vendor. At what temperatures are you receiving your food? You want to receive cold TCS foods at 41 degrees or lower. Live shellfish, shucked shellfish, eggs, and shell eggs can all be received at a temperature of 45 degrees. I'm actually going to pull out my highlighter for this one so you can see it just a little bit better. Can be received at 45 degrees as long as these items are cooled to 41 degrees in 4 hours. So that'd be a good note to write down. The same rule applies to both live and shucked shellfish. They can be received at 45 degrees or lower as long as they're cooled to 41 degrees or lower within 4 hours of you receiving it. Hot TCS food should be received at 135 degrees. Thawing and refreezing shows that the food has been time and temperature abused. Both food items and non-food items, such as single-use cups, utensils, and napkins, must be packaged correctly when you receive them. Items should be delivered in their original container with manufacturing label. The package should be intact, clean, and protect the food or food contact surface from contamination. Reject food and non-food items if packaging has problems listed on the slide. Food items must be correctly labeled. Do not accept food that is missing or used by date or expiration date from the manufacturer. This date is the recommended last date the product is at peak quality. Some operations label items with the date they received it to help the stock rotation during storage. You may see other dates on labels. A sell-by date tells the store how long to display the product for sale. A best-by date is the date to which the product should be eaten for best flavor or quality. Store shellfish in their original container. Do not remove the shell stock tag from the container until the last shellfish has been used. When the last shellfish is removed from the container, write down the dates, the shell stock tag, then keep the tag on file for 90 days from that date. 90 days from the sale of the fish. Other items also require documentation, including fish that will be eaten raw or partially cooked, as well as farm-raised fish. Poor food quality can be a sign that the food has been time and temperature abused and therefore may be unsafe. Work with your supplier to define specific safety and quality criteria for the food items you typically receive. Reject food if it has any problems shown on this slide. In addition to the guidelines above, you should always reject any item that does not meet your company's standards for quality. Labeling food is important for many reasons. Illnesses have occurred when unlabeled chemicals were mistaken for food such as flour, sugar, or baking powder. Customers have also suffered allergic reactions when food was unknowingly prepped with the food allergen. It's not necessary to label food if it is clearly will not be mistaken for anything else. The food must be easily identified by sight. Food packaged in the operation that is being sold to customers for use at home must be labeled. The label must include the information on the slide, naming the source of each major food allergen. These labeling requirements do not apply to customers' leftover food items placed in a carry-out container. Refrigeration slows the growth of most bacteria, but some types grow well at refrigeration temperatures. When food is refrigerated for long periods of time, this bacteria can grow enough to cause an illness. For this reason, ready-to-eat TCS food must be marked if held for longer than 24 hours. So make sure you are using a consistent date mark system. You can choose to write either the use by date or the preparation date on the food. If a commercially processed food has a use by date that's less than 7 days, you want to use that date because it is based on food safety. When you are combining foods, make sure you are combining to the earliest use by date of the combined items. An example is shown on this slide. Pathogens can grow when food is not stored at the correct temperature. Follow the guidelines to keep food safe, randomly sampling internal temperatures of food. Do not overload your coolers or freezers. Storing too many food items prevents good airflow. It makes the unit work harder to stay cold. Be aware that frequent opening and closing of the cooler lets warm air inside, which can affect food safety as well. Food must be rotated in storage using a FIFO system. That means first in, first out. In order to prevent cross-contamination, we make sure we store all items in the designated storage areas and 6 inches off the floor. Make sure you're also storing food in containers intended for food. Use containers that are durable, leak-proof, and able to be sealed and covered. Keep all storage areas clean and dry. Clean floors, walls, and shelving and coolers and freezing dry storage areas. And heated folding cabinets on a regular basis. Clean up spills and leaks promptly to keep them from contaminating other food. Store dirty linens away from food as well. Make sure you're always wrapping or covering your food to prevent cross-contamination. Raw meat, poultry, and seafood can be stored with or above ready-to-eat food in a freezer, if all the items have been commercially processed and packaged. Frozen food that is being thawed in the cooler must be able to be stored below ready-to-eat food. Food should be stored in clean, dry location away from dust and other contaminants. If you find expired, damaged, or spoiled, or incorrectly stored food that has become unsafe, you should discard it. If food must be stored until it can be returned to the vendor, there is a risk of contaminating the food stored near it. To prevent this, follow the guidelines on this slide. Chapter 6, the flow of food preparation. Checking to make sure your workstation is clean is the first step to preparing food. Everything that touches food should be cleaned and sanitized. The local regulatory authority in our area is the county. If you wanted to do green eggs and ham, for instance, you will need to call your county to ask them about any limitations. Food must be offered to customers in a way that does not mislead or misinform them. Customers must be able to judge the true appearance, color, and quality of food. Food that has become unsafe must be thrown out unless it can be safely reconditioned. All food, especially ready-to-eat food, must be thrown out in a situation highlighted in the slide. Sometimes food can be restored to a safe condition. This is called reconditioning. For example, a hot food that has not been held at the correct temperature may be reheated if it has not been in the temperature danger zone for more than 2 hours. When frozen food is thawed and exposed to temperature danger zone, pathogens in the food will begin to grow. To reduce this growth, never thaw food at room temperature. When thawing food under running water, the flow of water must be strong enough to wash away loose food bits into the drain. Always use a clean and sanitized food prep sink when thawing food in this way. Never let the temperature of the food go above 41 degrees Fahrenheit for longer than 4 hours. This includes the time it takes to thaw the food plus the time it takes to prep or cool it. The photo shows the correct way to thaw food under running water. After food is thawed in the microwave, it must be cooked in a conventional cooking equipment such as an oven. Because of concerns about the potential for botulism, frozen fish and ROP packaging has special handling practices. If your operation chooses to reduce the oxygen in packaged fish, it must be frozen and stay that way until it's ready to be used. Wash produce thoroughly under running water. This is especially important before cutting, cooking, or combining it with other ingredients. The water should be a little warmer than the produce. Pay special attention to leafy greens such as lettuce and spinach. Remove the outer leaves and pull the lettuce or spinach completely apart. And rinse thoroughly. Wash produce thoroughly under running water. This is especially important before cutting, cooking, or combining it with other ingredients. The water should be a little warmer than the produce. Pay special attention to leafy greens such as lettuce and spinach. Remove the outer leaves and pull the lettuce or spinach completely apart and rinse thoroughly. Certain chemicals may be used to wash fruits and vegetables. Also, produce can be treated by washing it in water containing ozone. This treatment helps control pathogens. Your local regulatory authority can tell what is acceptable to use this. Refrigerate and hold cut melons, cut tomatoes, and cut leafy greens at 41 degrees or lower. They are TCS foods. Many operations hold other fresh cut produce at this temperature as well. Pooled eggs are eggs that are cracked open and combined in a container. Check with your local regulatory authority to see if pooling eggs is allowed. Eggs require little or no cooking include Caesar salad dressing, hollandaise sauce, tiramisu, and mousse. Use pasteurized eggs or egg products when serving raw or undercooked dishes to high-risk populations. When you are working primarily with high risk, like in a nursing home, hospital, or daycare, be very careful when handling pooled shell eggs. Chicken, tuna, egg, pasta, potato salad have all been involved in foodborne illness outbreaks. These salads are not usually cooked after preparation. This means you do not have a chance to reduce pathogens that may have gotten into the salad. Leftover TCS foods such as pasta, chicken, and potato can be used only if it has been cooked, held, and cooled correctly. Throw out leftover food held at 41 degrees or lower after 7 days. Check the use-by date of the stored TCS food before using it. Make ice from water that is safe to drink. Never use ice as an ingredient if it was used to keep food cold. For example, if ice is used to cool food on a salad bar, it cannot be used in drinks. You will need a variance when prepping food in certain ways. A variance is a document issued by your regulatory authority that allows a regulatory requirement to be waived or changed. A variance allows a regulatory requirement to be waived or changed. Reduced oxygen packaging (ROP) includes MAP, vacuum packed, and sous vide food, as shown in the photo. When applying for a variance, your regulatory authority may require you to submit a HACCP plan. The HACCP plan must account for any food safety risk related to the way you plan to prepare the food item. You must comply with HACCP plan and procedures submitted. Finally, you have to maintain the HACCP plan and any other associated documents, including the variance, at the operation, and you have to provide them to the regulatory authority if requested. Records must show that you have procedures for monitoring critical control points and are regularly monitoring them. They must show that you are taking necessary corrective actions if there is a failure at a critical control point and verifying the effectiveness of the procedures or process. The only way to reduce pathogens in food to safe levels is to cook it to its required minimum internal temperature. The temperature is different for each food. If customers request the food items to be cooked to temperatures lower than the minimum internal temperatures, you need to inform the customers of the potential risk of foodborne illness. Also, be aware of special menu restrictions if you serve high-risk populations. While cooking reduces pathogens in food, it does not destroy spores or toxins that may be produced. You still must handle food correctly before you cook it. So let's go over the minimum internal cooking temperatures. For poultry, including whole or ground chicken, turkey, or duck, stuffing made with fish, meat, or poultry, stuffed meat, seafood, poultry, or pasta, and dishes that include previously cooked TCS foods must be cooked to a minimum of 165 degrees Fahrenheit. For ground meat, including beef, pork, veal, and lamb, meat mechanically tenderized with needles, blades, or by injecting it with brine or flavors, including brined ham, Thanksgiving, I know, meat vacuum tumble with marinades or other solutions, ground meat from game animals, commercially raised and inspected, must be cooked to minimum internal temperature of 155 degrees Fahrenheit. Racketees are mostly flightless birds with flat breastbones, including ostrich and emu. Then we have ground seafood and shell eggs that are high hopes for service, like those scrambled eggs at your favorite buffet spot. They must be cooked to a minimum internal temperature of 155 degrees Fahrenheit. For seafood, including fish, shellfish, and crustaceans, steaks and chops, including beef, pork, veal, and lamb, commercially raised game, and shell eggs that will be served immediately to the guests, must be cooked at internal temperature of 145 degrees Fahrenheit. For roast, including pork, beef, veal, and lamb, must be cooked to a minimum internal temperature of 145 degrees Fahrenheit. Food from plants, including fruits and vegetables, including rice and pasta and legumes, that will be hot held for service, must be cooked to a minimum internal temperature of 135 degrees. For your TCS foods that you choose to cook in the microwave, must be cooked to a minimum internal temperature of 165 degrees Fahrenheit. This goes for meat, seafood, poultry, and eggs. Cover the food to prevent its surface from drying out. Rotate or stir the food halfway through the cooking process to make sure the heat reaches the food more evenly. Let the covered food stand for at least 2 minutes after cooking to let the food temperature even out. Check the temperature in at least 2 places to make sure the food is cooked through. Some operations partially cook food during prep and then finish cooking it just before service. Partially cooking is also called par cooking. You must follow the steps in the slide if you plan to partially cook meat, seafood, poultry, or eggs, or dishes containing these items. Your local regulatory authority will require you to have written procedures that explain how food cooked by this process will be prepped and stored. These procedures must be approved by the regulatory authority and describe the items on the slide. TCS food must be cooked to the minimum internal temperature unless the customer requests otherwise. You can remind customers of the risk by posting a notice on your menu. You can also provide information using brochures, table tents, signs, or other written methods. The Food and Drug Administration, FDA, advises against offering raw or undercooked meat, poultry, seafood, or eggs on children's menus. This is especially true for undercooked ground beef, which may be contaminated with sugar toxin producing E. coli. When serving primarily high-risk populations, make sure you never serve any of these foods. As you know, pathogens grow well in the temperature danger zone. However, they grow much faster at temperatures between 125 degrees Fahrenheit and 7 degrees Fahrenheit. Food must pass through this temperature range quickly to reduce its growth. TCS food must be cooled from 135 degrees Fahrenheit or lower within 6 hours. First cool food from 135 to 70 degrees within the first 2 hours, then cool it to 41 degrees Fahrenheit or lower in the next 4 hours. If food has not cooled to 70 degrees within 2 hours, it must be reheated, then cooled again. If you cool food quicker than the 2 hours, then you still have the remaining time to cool food down to 41. For example, if you cool food from 135 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit in 1 hour, then you have 5 hours to get food to 41 degrees or lower. The denser the food, the more slowly it will cool. Large food items cool more slowly than smaller items. To let food cool faster, you should reduce its size, cut large food items into smaller pieces, divide large containers of food into smaller containers or shallow pans. Never cool large amounts of hot food in a cooler. Let me say it again for those people in the back. Never cool large amounts of hot food in a cooler. Most coolers are not designed to cool large amounts of hot food quickly. Also, placing hot food in a cooler may not move the food through the temperature danger zone quickly enough. After dividing food into smaller containers, place them into a clean prep sink or a large pot filled with ice water. Stir the food frequently to cool it faster and more evenly. Blast chillers blast cold air across the food at high speeds to remove heat. They are typically used to cool large amounts of food. Ice paddles are plastic paddles that can be filled with ice or with water. And then frozen. Food stirred with these paddles can cool quickly. Food cools even faster when placed in an ice water bath and stirred with an ice paddle. When cooling soups or stews, you can add ice or cold water as an ingredient to cool it. To use this method, the recipe is made with less water than required. Cold water or ice is then added after cooking to cool the food and provide the remaining water. When you are storing food in the cooler for further cooling, make sure it's loosely covered before storing them. Food can be left uncovered if protected from contamination, which means it's stored above other food, especially raw seafood, meat, poultry, that will help prevent cross-contamination. These guidelines apply to all heating methods, such as ovens or microwave ovens. Chapter 7, The Flow of Food. Service. Create policies about how long the operation will hold food. Also create policies about when to throw away held food. For example, your policy may let you refill a pan of veal in a buffet all day, as long as you throw it out at the end of the day. Policies should also consider the guidelines in these slides. Create policies about when to throw away food held. For example, your policy may let you refill a pan of veal in a buffet all day as long as you throw it out at the end of the day. Policies should also consider the guidelines in these slides. Use a thermometer to check a food's internal temperature. Never use a temperature gauge on a holding unit to do it. The gauge does not check the internal temperature of the food. Make sure the food handlers are regularly monitoring food temperatures during hot and cold holding. You can check the temperatures every 2 hours. This will leave time for corrective action. For example, hot TCS food that has been held below 135 degrees Fahrenheit can be reheated and then placed back into the hot holding unit. Most hot holding equipment does not pass food through the temperature danger zone quickly enough to be used as reheating equipment. The operation may want to display or hold ready-to-eat TCS food without temperature control. However, if you primarily serve high-risk populations, you cannot do it. If your operation displays or holds TCS ready-to-eat food without temperature control, it must do so under certain conditions. Also note that the conditions for holding cold food are different from those for holding hot food. Before using time as a method of control, check with your local regulatory authority for specific requirements. The discard time on the label must be 6 hours from the time you remove the food from refrigeration. For example, if you remove potato salad from refrigeration at 3 p.m. to start with a picnic, the discard time on the label should read 9 p.m. This is 6 hours from the time you removed it from refrigeration. There are some alternatives to holding cold, ready-to-eat TCS food without temperature control. If the food is discarded within 4 hours, it can be allowed to reach any temperature during service. However, the food must be held at 41 degrees Fahrenheit or lower before removing it from the temperature control. The discard time on the label must also be 4 hours from the time you remove the food from temperature control. And food must be sold, served, or thrown out within 4 hours. Here's another alternative. As previously stated, cold ready-to-eat TCS food must be held at 41 degrees or lower before being removed from refrigeration. If it's held without temperature control, however, there is an exception to that temperature for certain products. That includes ready-to-eat fruits or vegetables that become a TCS food when they're cut, chopped, or sliced, like sliced tomatoes, cut leafy greens, or cut melons. The same is true for hermetically sealed containers of foods that become TCS foods when opened, like a can of tuna. These items can actually start with the initial temperature of 70 degrees or lower. However, the product has to be discarded within 4 hours, and it can't exceed 70 degrees within the 4-hour period. Finally, the discard time on the label must be 4 hours from the time the product became a TCS food. Labeled food with time and temperature control for safety. Label the food with the time you must throw it out. The discard time on the label must be 4 hours from the time you remove the food from temperature control. Before using time as a method of control, check with your local regulatory authority for specific requirements. Though a regulatory authority may require you to prepare written procedures and get written approval in advance. You will also need to maintain these procedures in operation and make sure they are made available to the regulatory authority upon request. The biggest threat to food that is ready to be served is contamination. Train your kitchen staff to follow these guidelines when serving food to avoid contamination. Spoons and scoops used to serve food, such as ice cream or mashed potatoes, can be stored under running water. They can also be stored in a container of water that is maintained at a temperature of at least 135 degrees Fahrenheit. Some jurisdictions allow food handlers to refill the take-home containers brought back by guests with food and beverages. Take-home containers can be refilled if they meet the conditions on the slides. The container has to be capable of being effectively cleaned at home and in the operation. Service staff must be as careful as kitchen staff. They can contaminate food simply by handling the food contact areas of glasses, dishes, and utensils. Service staff should use these guidelines when they're serving food. Hold dishes by the bottom or edge. Hold glasses by the middle, bottom, or stem. Do not touch food contact areas of dishes or glassware. Carry glasses in a rack or on a tray to avoid touching the food contact surface. Last but not least, do not stack glasses when carrying them. Hold flatware by the handle. Do not hold flatware by food contact surface, and store flatware so that the server is to grab handles and not the food contact surface. Avoid bare hand contact with food that is ready to eat. Use ice scoops or tongues to get ice, and never scoop ice with your bare hands or a glass. A glass may chip or break into the ice. Table settings do not need to be wrapped or covered if extra settings meet these requirements. They are removed when guests are seated. If they remain on the table, they are cleaned and sanitized after guests have left. You must protect condiments from contamination. Serve them in their original container or in containers designed to prevent contamination. Offering condiments in individual packets or portions can also help keep them safe. Never reserve uncovered condiments. Do not combine leftover condiments with fresh ones. Throw away opened portions or dishes of condiments after serving them to customers. Salsa, butter, mayonnaise, and ketchup are some examples. Change linens used in bread baskets after each customer. In general, only unopened prepackaged food can be reserved. That includes condiment packs, wrapped crackers and breadsticks, the bottles of ketchup, and mustard. The containers must remain closed between uses. Food on display can be protected from contamination using sneeze guards. Food can also be protected by placing it in display cases or by packaging it in a way that protects it from contamination. Whole, raw fruits and vegetables and nuts in the shell that require peeling or hauling before eating do not require these protection measures. Label food located in self-service areas. For example, place the name of the food, such as the type of salad dressing, on ladle, handles, or signs. Typically, raw, unpackaged meat, poultry, and seafood cannot be offered for self-service. However, the following items are exceptions to this rule. Ready-to-eat food at buffets or salad bars that serve food as sushi or raw shellfish. Ready-to-cook portions that will be cooked and eaten immediately on the premise, such as Mongolian barbecues, raw, frozen, shell-on shrimp or lobster. Assign a staff member to monitor guests. Post signs reminding guests not to reuse plates and utensils. Stock food displays with the correct utensils for dispensing food. This might include tongues, ladles, or deli sheets. Also be sure to label bulk food in self-service areas. Bulk unpackaged food such as bakery products and unpackaged food portioned for customers does not need to be labeled if it meets the conditions identified in the slide. Delays from the point of preparation to the point of service increase the risk that food will be exposed to contamination or time and temperature abuse. At the service site, use appropriate containers and equipment to hold food. Check internal temperatures. If containers or delivery vehicles are not holding food at the correct temperature, reevaluate the length of the delivery route or the efficiency of the equipment being used. When transporting food offsite, make sure that the service site has these two main utilities, including safe water and garbage containers. Handle food prepped and packaged for vending machines with the same care as any other food served to customers. Vending operators should protect food from contamination and time temperature abuse during transport, delivery, and service. Check product shelf life daily. Products often have a code date, such as an expiration or use by date. If the date has expired, throw out the food immediately. Throw out refrigerated food prepped on site if not sold within 7 days of preparation. Keep TCS food at the correct temperature. It should be held at 41 degrees or lower or 135 degrees or higher. These machines must have controls that prevent TCS food from being dispensed. If the temperature stays in the danger zone for a specified amount of time, the food must be thrown out. Chapter 8: Food Safety Management Systems. Food safety management systems are a group of practices and procedures intended to prevent foodborne illness. Food safety management systems actively controls risk and hazards throughout the flow of food. Having food safety programs already in place gives you the foundation for your system. The principles presented in the Serve Safe program are the basis of these programs. It is the manager's responsibility to actively control these and other risk factors for foodborne illness. This is called active managerial control. Active managerial control is proactive rather than reactive. You must anticipate risk and plan for them. There are many ways to achieve active managerial control in the operation. According to the Food and Drug Administration, you can use simple tools such as training programs, manager supervision, and the incorporation of SOPs. Active managerial control can also be achieved through more complex solutions such as Hazard Analysis Critical Control Point Program, also known as HACCP. Managers should practice active managerial control throughout the flow of food. This includes anticipating potential foodborne illness risk factors, then controlling or eliminating them. Find and document the potential foodborne illness risk in your operation. Then identify the hazards that can be controlled or eliminated. Food will be safe if managers monitor critical activities in the operation, so make note of where employees must monitor food safety requirements. This might include identifying when temperatures should be taken or how often sanitizer solutions should be tested. Take the appropriate steps to correct improper procedures or behaviors. For example, if sanitizer levels are too low, the situation might be corrected by increasing the concentration level. The FDA provides specific recommendations for controlling the common risk factors for foodborne illness. These are known as public health interventions. They are designed to protect public health. Number 1, demonstration of knowledge. As a manager, you must be able to show that you know what to do to keep food safe. Becoming certified in food safety is one way to show this. Next, we have staff health controls. Procedures must be put in place to make sure staff are practicing good personal hygiene. For example, staff must know that they are required to report illnesses and illness symptoms to management. Controlling hands as a vehicle of contamination. Controls must be put in place to prevent bare hand contact with ready-to-eat food. This might include requiring the use of tongues to handle ready-to-eat food. Time and temperature parameters for controlling pathogens. Procedures must be put in place to limit the time food spends in the temperature danger zone, requiring food handlers to check the temperature of food being hot-held every 2 hours is an example. Lastly, consumer advisories. Notices must be provided to customers if you serve raw or undercooked menu items. These notices must include a statement about the risk of eating these foods. There are many systems you can implement to achieve active managerial control of foodborne illness risk factors. A hazard analysis critical control point program is one such system. HACCP is based on identifying significant biological, chemical, or physical hazards at specific points within the product's flow. Once identified, the hazards can be prevented, eliminated, or reduced to safe levels. An effective HACCP system must be based on a written plan. This plan must be specific to each facility's menu, customers, equipment, processes, and operation. Because each HACCP plan is unique, a plan that works for one operation may not work for another one. Chapter 9, Safe Facilities and Pest Management. You may need to consult your local regulatory authority before making changes to your operation, including the facility or equipment. Once installed, flooring, walls, and ceilings must be regularly maintained. Replace missing or broken ceiling tiles. Do the same for flooring. Repair all holes in walls. Coping is a curved, sealed edge between the floor and the wall. It gets rid of sharp corners or gaps that are hard to clean. Coping should be glued tightly to the wall to get rid of hiding place for insects. This also protects the wall from moisture. If standing water occurs due to spraying or when flushing the floors during cleaning, remove the water as quickly as possible. Food service equipment must meet certain standards if it comes in contact with food. That includes being smooth, easy to clean, durable, and resistant to damage. Organizations such as the NSF have developed standards like these for the sanitary design and construction of food service equipment. They also certify equipment that meets these standards. Other organizations classify equipment or evaluate it to ensure that it meets the standards developed by others. These organizations must be accredited by the American National Standards Institute, or ANSI. When purchasing equipment, look for the NSF mark, the ULEPH classified mark, or the ETL sanitation mark. These indicate the equipment has been certified or classified for sanitation under an ANSI accredited program. Stationary equipment should be easy to clean and easy to clean all around. When installing equipment, follow the manufacturer's recommendations. Also, check with your regulatory authority for requirements. Once the equipment has been installed, it must be maintained regularly by a qualified person. Set up a maintenance schedule with your supplier or manufacturer. Check the equipment regularly to make sure it's working correctly. Always follow the manufacturer's instructions when installing, operating, and maintaining a dishwasher. When you are selecting a dishwashing machine, make sure it can measure water temperature, water pressure, cleaning, and sanitizing chemical concentration. Post information about the correct settings on the machine. Cleaning dishwashing machines. Clean them often as necessary. Follow manufacturer's recommendations and your local regulatory authority. Many operations use 3-compartment sinks to clean and sanitize items manually in the operation. Purchase sinks that are large enough to accommodate large equipment and utensils. You should also have other methods for cleaning these large items, such as cleaning them in place. Hand washing stations should be put in areas that make it easy for staff to wash their hands often. They need to be convenient and located near restrooms, food prep areas, service areas, and dishwashing areas as well. Hand washing sinks must be used only for hand washing and not for any other purpose. To prevent cross-contamination, make sure adequate barriers are present on hand washing sinks and there is an adequate distance between the hand washing sink and the food or food contact surface so that the water cannot splash onto these items. Make sure hand washing stations work correctly and are stocked and maintained. They must also be available at all times. Hand washing stations cannot be blocked by portable equipment or stacked full of dirty kitchenware. The water must be drinkable and meet temperature requirements and pressure. The soap can be liquid, bar, or powder. Disposable paper towels or continuous towel system that supplies the user with a clean towel can be used. Hands can also be drained with a hand dryer using either warm air or room temperature air delivered at high speeds. An operation uses many utilities and building systems. Utilities include water, electricity, gas, sewage, and garbage disposal. Building systems include plumbing, lighting, and ventilation. There must be enough utilities to meet the needs of the operation. In addition, the utilities and systems must work correctly. If they do not, the risk of contamination is greater. Each regulatory authority establishes standards for water in their jurisdiction. Only water that is drinkable can be used for the preparation of food and come in contact with food contact surfaces. Drinkable water is called potable water. Regardless of where your water comes from, you should know how to prevent plumbing issues that can affect the food safety. Plumbing that is not installed or maintained correctly can allow drinkable and unsafe water to be mixed. This can cause a foodborne illness outbreak. Have only licensed plumbers work in the plumbing in your operation. The greatest challenge to water safety comes from the cross connection. A cross connection is a physical link between safe water and dirty water. I'm going to repeat it again so you can write it down. A cross connection is a physical link between safe water and dirty water, which can come from drains, sewers, or other wastewater sources. A cross connection is dangerous because it can let backflow occur. Backflow can be a result of pressure pushing contaminants back into the water supply. It can also happen when high water uses one area of the operation, creates a vacuum in the plumbing system that sucks contaminants back into the water supply. This is called back siphonage. A running faucet below the flood rim of the sink is an example of a cross connection that can lead to back siphonage. A running hose in a mop bucket is another example. The best way to prevent backflow is to avoid creating a cross connection. Do not attach a hose to a faucet unless a backflow prevention device such as a vacuum breaker is attached. A vacuum breaker is a mechanical device that prevents back siphonage. It does this by closing a check valve and sealing the water supply line shut when water flow is stopped. Other mechanical devices are used to prevent backflow. These include double check valves and reduced pressure zone backflow preventers. These devices include more than one check valve for sealing off water supply. They also provide a way to determine if a check valve are operational. Backflow prevention devices must be checked periodically to make sure they are working correctly. This work must be done and documented by a trained and certified technician. Always follow local requirements and manufacturer's recommendations. The only sure way to prevent backflow is to create an air gap. An air gap is an airspace that separates water supply outlet from potentially contaminated source. A sink that is correctly designed and installed usually has two air gaps. As shown in the graphic on the slide, one is between the faucet and the flood rim of the sink, and the other is between the drain pipe and the floor of the sink. A buildup of grease in pipes is another common problem in plumbing systems. Grease traps are often installed to prevent grease buildup from blocking the drain. If used, they should be put in place by a licensed plumber. Good lighting makes it easy to clean things in your operation. It also provides a safer environment. Lighting intensity. How bright the lights are in the operation is usually measured in units called foot candles or lux. Local jurisdictions usually require prep areas to be brighter than other areas. This allows staff to recognize the condition of food. It also allows staff to identify items that need cleaning. Once the appropriate level of lighting has been installed in each area's facility, you must monitor it, replace any light bulbs that have been burned out, and make sure they're the correct size. All lights should have a shatterproof resistant light bulb or protective casing. This product prevents broken glass from entering or contaminating food. Ventilation improves the air inside the operation. It removes heat, steam, and smoke from cooking lines. It also eliminates fumes and odors. If ventilation systems are not working correctly, grease and condensation will build up on walls and ceilings. Garbage can attract pests and contaminate food, equipment, and utensils if not handled correctly. Staff must be careful when removing garbage so they do not contaminate food or food contact surfaces. The food handler in the photo has not been careful and may contaminate the prep table. Clean the inside and outside of garbage containers frequently. This will help prevent the contamination of food and food contact surfaces. It will also reduce odors and pests. Do not clean garbage containers near prep or food storage areas. Containers must be covered when not in use. Women's restrooms must include a covered receptacle for sanitary napkins. Waste and recyclables must be stored separately from food and food contact surfaces. The storage of these items must not create a nuisance or public health hazard. Outdoor containers must have a tight-fitting lid and must be kept covered at all times. Keep their drain plugs in place as well. Make sure the building is sound. There should be no leaks, holes, or cracks in the floors, foundations, ceilings, or windows. In the photo here, the maintenance worker is filling in cracks of an exterior wall to keep out pests. Certain crises can affect the safety of the food you serve. Common crises include electrical power outages, fire, flooding, sewage backups. Local regulatory authority consider these to be imminent health hazards. An imminent health hazard is a significant threat or danger to health that requires immediate correction or closure to prevent injury. Power failures and refrigeration breakdowns can threaten your ability to control the temperature of TCS food, which can result in the growth of a pathogen. Unauthorized people inside a facility are a risk to food safety. This is especially true when they can access storage and processing areas. Also, acts of nature can weaken facility security. Threats to the drinkable water supply must also be considered. Drinkable water mains, or broken water mains and breakdowns at water treatment facilities are a risk to the safety of food. Terrorist contamination or water supply could also be a threat. When faced with a crisis that could cause a health hazard, you must first determine if there is significant risk. Next, if the risk is significant, service must be stopped. Then the local regulatory authority must be notified. Spoiled or contaminated food must be thrown out, along with food and packaging that is not intact. Regardless of how the problem is corrected, you will need approval from the local regulatory authority before continuing service. The regulatory authority may allow an operation to continue operating in the event of a water or electrical interruption. To do this, however, there are certain conditions that you'll have to meet. That includes having a written emergency operating plan that's approved in advance by the regulatory authority. You'll also have to make sure that you're taking immediate corrective action to prevent, eliminate, or control any food safety risk or imminent health hazards associated with interruption. And finally, the regulatory authority has to be informed whenever you implement your emergency operation plan. There are 3 rules to prevent pests. You want to deny them access to the operation, food, water, and shelter, as well as hire a licensed pest control operator, or PCO for short. Careful cleaning eliminates the pest food supply, destroys insect eggs, and reduces the place where pests can take shelter. Throw out garbage quickly and correctly. Keep garbage containers clean and in good condition. Keep outdoor containers tightly covered. Clean up spills around garbage containers immediately and wash containers regularly. Store recyclables in clean, pest-proof containers. Keep them as far away from your building as local regulations allow. Store all food and supplies correctly and as quickly as possible. Keep food and supplies away from walls and at least 6 inches off the floor. Use FIFO to rotate products so that pests do not have time to settle and breed. Clean up food and beverage spills immediately, including crumbs and scraps. Check all deliveries before they enter your operation. Refuse shipments in which you find pests or signs of pests. This includes egg cases, body parts, legs, wings, etc. Make sure all the points where pests can access the building are secure. Screen all windows and vents, and patch or replace them as needed. Seal cracks in floors and walls and around pipes, installing self-closing doors and air curtains, also called air doors, or fly fans above or alongside the door. Even after you have made every effort to keep pests out, they may still get into your operation. Work with the PCO to get them under control. Even if you only spot a few pests, they may actually be present in large numbers. Infestations can be very difficult to eliminate. Look for feces, nests, and damage on products, packaging, and the facility itself. The image on the slide shows a rodent nest. Contact your PCO immediately if you see these or any other pest-related problems so that control measures can be taken. Poisonous or toxic pest control materials should only be applied by a certified applicator. Chapter 10, Cleaning and Sanitizing. Food can easily be contaminated if you do not keep your facility and equipment clean and sanitized. There are a variety of cleaners available, each with different purpose. Ask your supplier to help you pick cleaners that meet your needs. They must also be provided and available to employees during all hours of operation. Follow manufacturer's instructions carefully. If not used the correct way, cleaners may not work and can even be dangerous. Food contact surfaces must be sanitized after they have been cleaned and rinsed. This can be done by using heat or chemicals. One way to sanitize items is to soak them in hot water. For this method to work, the water must be at least 171 degrees Fahrenheit. The items must be soaked for at least 30 seconds. Another way to sanitize is to run them through a high-temperature dishwasher. Tableware, utensils, and equipment can be sanitized by soaking them in a cleaning sanitizing solution. You can also rinse, swab, or spray with the sanitizing solution. Chemical sanitizers are regulated by state and federal environmental protection agencies. They must be provided and available to employees during all hours of operation. In some cases, you can use detergent sanitizer blends to sanitize. Operations that have two-compartment sinks often use these. Several factors influence the effectiveness of chemical sanitizers. The most critical include concentration, temperature, contact time, water hardness, and pH. Sanitizer solution is a mix of chemical sanitizer and water. The concentration of this mix, the amount of sanitizer to water, is critical. Too much water may make the solution weak and useless, and too much sanitizer may make the solution too strong and unsafe. It can also have a bad taste on items or corrode metals. Concentration is measured in parts per million, or ppm. To check the concentration of a sanitizer solution, use a test kit. Make sure it is made for the sanitizer being used. These kits are usually available from the chemical manufacturer or supplier. Make sure test kits are available at all times and easily accessible to employees. Hard water and food bits and leftover detergent can reduce the solution's effectiveness. Change the solution when it looks dirty or its concentration is too low. The bin in this photo is being sanitized in an iodine sanitizing solution and must be in contact with solution for at least 30 seconds. Water hardness can affect how well a sanitizer works. Water hardness is the amount of minerals in your water. Water pH can also affect this sanitizer. Water hardness and pH. Find out your operation's water hardness and pH from municipality. Work with your supplier to identify the correct amount of sanitizer to use for your water. So what you should know about all sanitizers is their individual concentration range. For chlorine, it's 50 to 99 ppm. That's exactly what I would write down. Chlorine concentration, 50 to 99 ppm. For iodine, it is 12.5 to 25 ppm. 12.5 to 25 ppm. And then for quartz, that will depend on your manufacturer, so that won't be on your exam. Surfaces that do not touch food only need to be cleaned and rinsed to prevent the accumulation of dirt. However, any surface that does touch food should be cleaned, rinsed, and sanitized. You notice at some places it says wash, rinse, and sanitized. It means the same thing. Don't let it confuse you. To clean and sanitize a surface, follow the steps that are detailed here. If the surface has not been cleaned and sanitized properly, you're going to want to take corrective action. The first step is to scrape or remove food bits from the surface. Make sure you use the correct cleaning tool for this. 2. Wash the surface. Prepare the cleaning solution with an approved detergent. You want to make sure you wash that surface also with the correct cleaning tool. 3. Rinse the surface using clean water. 4. Make sure you sanitize the surface. Use the correct sanitizing solution, prepared to the right concentration, and to the manufacturer's requirements. And 5. Allow the surface to air dry. Do not use a towel to dry the surface. Right. When you're cleaning stationary equipment, it's important that you first unplug the equipment so that no one gets hurt. Then you're going to take off all the removable parts and then wash, rinse, and sanitize them by hand or run them through the dishwasher if allowed. Then you're going to follow those same steps for the in-place equipment. Scrape all the food bits from the surface, then wash, rinse, and sanitize. Wash the equipment surface using a cleaning solution prepared with an approved cleaner. Wash the equipment with the correct cleaning tool, such as a nylon brush or pad or cloth towel. Rinse the equipment surface with clean water. Use a cloth towel or other correct tool. Sanitize the equipment surface and make sure the sanitizer comes in contact with each surface. The concentration of the sanitizer must meet requirements. Some pieces of equipment, such as soft serve yogurt machines, are designed to have a cleaning and sanitizing solution pumped through them. Because they hold TCS food, they must be cleaned and sanitized on a daily basis, unless otherwise indicated by the manufacturer. Dishwashing machines sanitize by using either hot water or a chemical sanitizing solution. High temperature machines use hot water to clean and sanitize. If the water is not hot enough, items will not be sanitized. And extremely hot water can also bake food onto the item. The dishwasher must have a built-in thermometer that checks the water temperature at the manifold. This is where the water sprays into the tank. Chemical sanitizing machines can clean and sanitize items at a much lower temperature. Because sanitizers require different water temperatures, follow the dishwasher manufacturer's guidelines. Clean the machine as often as needed, checking it at least once a day. Clear spray nozzles of food and foreign objects and remove mineral deposits when needed. Fill the tanks with clean water and make sure the detergent and sanitizer dispensers are filled. Operations using high-temperature dishwashing machines must provide staff with an easy and quick way to measure the surface temperature of items being sanitized. The method used must provide an irreversible record of the highest temperature reached during the sanitation rinse. This ensures that the dishwasher can reach correct sanitizing temperatures during operation. Maximum registering thermometers or heat-sensitive tape are good tools for checking temperatures. Three-compartment sinks must be set up correctly before use. Fill the first sink with detergent and water. This will be your wash sink. The water temperature must be at least 110 degrees for your wash sink. Follow the manufacturer's recommendations. Fill the second sink with clean water. This is not necessary if items will be spray rinsed instead of dipped. Fill the third sink with water and sanitize it to the correct concentration. Hot water can be used as an alternative. Follow the guidelines previously discussed for sanitizers of the manufacturer's recommendations. Provide a clock with a second hand so food handlers can time how long items have been in the sanitizer. Once utensils, tableware, and equipment have been cleaned and sanitized, they must be stored in a way that will protect them from contamination. Tableware and utensils should be protected from dirt and moisture. Store flatware and utensils with handles up. Staff can then pick up without touching food contact surfaces, which will help prevent the transfer of pathogens. Clean and sanitize trays and carts used to carry clean tableware and utensils. Clean them daily and clean them often as needed. Keep your operation clean means using the correct tools, supplies, and storage to prevent contamination. Wiping cloths are often used in operation to wipe up food spills and to wipe down equipment surfaces. And there are two types of wiping cloths used: wet cloths and dry cloths. Each has its own requirements, and never use cloths that were meant for wiping up food spills for any other purpose. Store wet wiping cloths used for wiping counters and other equipment surfaces in a sanitizer solution between uses, as shown in the photo on the slide. Change the solution when it no longer meets the requirements for the sanitizer being used. Dry wiping cloths are intended for food spills from tableware and must be kept dry while in use. Many surfaces in the operation do not normally come in contact with food. These are called non-food contact surfaces. Examples include floors, walls, ceilings, and equipment exteriors, because they are not food contact surfaces. They do not need to be sanitized. However, they do need to be cleaned regularly. Not only will this prevent the growth of pathogens, but it will also prevent pests. To be effective, operations must have written procedures for cleaning up vomit and diarrhea. These procedures must address specific actions that employees must take to minimize contamination and exposure to food surfaces. It is critical that employees be trained on these procedures. Your staff needs many tools and supplies to keep the operation clean. However, these items can contaminate food and surfaces if they are not used and stored correctly. Cleaning tools must be stored so they do not contaminate food and equipment. It is best practice to store these items in a designated area away from food. Cleaning tools should also be stored in a way that makes it easy to clean the area they are stored in. When storing cleaning tools, consider the following. Place mops in a position to air dry without soiling walls, equipment, or supplies. Clean and rinse buckets, let them air dry, and then store them. If chemicals or cleaning tools have not been used or stored correctly, take corrective actions immediately. Many chemicals used in the operation can be hazardous, especially if they are used or stored wrong. One of the biggest dangers is cross-contamination. To reduce your risk, follow the guidelines on the slide. Only chemicals approved for use in the food service operation should be used. Never keep chemicals that are not required to operate or maintain the establishment. To prevent contamination, always cover or remove items that could become contaminated before using chemicals. After using chemicals, make sure to clean and sanitize equipment and utensils. Chemicals must be stored in their original containers. Some operations also designate specific areas for storing chemicals. Whether or not this is done, chemicals must be kept separate from food, equipment, utensils, and linens. This separation can be done either of ways by spacing chemicals apart from other items or partitioning off chemicals from other items stored in the same area. Regardless of the method used, chemicals must always be stored below food, equipment, utensils, and linens. If chemicals are transferred to a new working container, the label on that container must list the common name of the chemical. The photo on the slide shows a working container labeled with the common name of the chemical. To develop a good cleaning program, you want to focus on these 3 steps: create, train, and monitor. To create a master cleaning schedule, you want to list all cleaning jobs in one area, or list jobs in the order they should be performed, including both food and non-food surfaces as items that need to be cleaned. Assign each cleaning task to a specific individual. Staff should clean and sanitize as needed. Schedule major cleaning when food will not be contaminated or service will not be affected. Schedule work shifts to allow for enough time. Have clear written procedures for cleaning. List cleaning tools and chemicals by name. Post cleaning directions near the item, and always follow the manufacturer's instructions when cleaning equipment. Lastly, you also want to train and monitor the cleaning program. Train your staff to follow the program. Schedule time for training. Work with small groups or conduct trainings by area. Make sure the cleaning program is working. Change the master schedule as needed if any changes in the menu, procedures, or equipment. Ask staff during meetings for input on the program. Thank you so much for choosing to learn with me today. I'm very honored to have you. Um, First, I want to give you some best next steps and that you have completed it. We're right over the 2-hour mark, so this is a pretty short study session. So I want you to do the practice quiz that I have attached to your email. Then I want you to email me any questions you have after passing your practice quiz. You might have to take it a few times, but just keep practicing, keep working at the material, and you'll be super ready to go by the time your course gets here. 3, I want you to re-listen to any difficult topics, whether that be your temperatures, coding, pest control, personal hygiene, whatever your difficult areas are, feel free to double back and listen to those chapters again. I'm always available to answer any questions that you may have. You can send me a text to 678-674-4823. That's 678-674-4823. Typically, I'm able to respond to text messages almost immediately within 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. After that, I kind of shut my phone off. You can also send me an email at Reese, R-E-E-S-E, at savortraining.com. R-E-E-S-E at savortraining.com. Thank you so much for learning with me. Can't wait to see you. Bye.